All yours,
Thank,
Violeta.
well, thank you very much, John, for this very, very conversation. And I hope on the vibe of what you shared with us, I'd like to invite my colleagues to join the next topic. And I'm inviting Vladimir, Gabrielle, Rajni, and Alice to smoothly enter another topic which we are dealing with basically daily, but we're constantly confronted with many challenges around it, which is, can leadership exist without a leader? The reason why this question was brought forward is after hosting a year of leadership challenge last year, and also looking around, seeing that leadership schools and different sessions are popping up everywhere around the world. Yet when you look around, my goodness, where is leadership leading us? So that's why we brought this topic to Connectathon, to explore it and to see if there are some new ideas emerging from different parts of the world. And of course, everyone who's with us here today is welcome to then come in and discuss it. So with me are very interesting people. Vladimir, who comes from Serbia, and especially in Europe, we've been very closely following the students' uprising in Serbia, and because they offered a completely different ways of leadership. Basically, leadership without a clear leader, yet with tremendous impact and enormous amount of actions that they've been able to organize. So we'll be trying to explore this option. With us is also Gabrielle, who knows where the life took her at this point, but she's originally from Austria. However, we've met in a very difficult, challenging times during COVID, where she was one of the team who brought together on an open space and with the support of European framework, especially young people, but also some of the oldest joined them, from all over to deliver some open source, basically inhalators for people who could not afford it, and beyond the corporate dominance at that time. With us is also Alice, who has been an inspiring spirit of eco-civilization over the years, and she's also trying to see beyond just the current structures, how can help and hold space for the communities and societies to evolve and raise the level of consciousness about the challenges on a local level. And last but not least, Rajni, who's been also with the Ecocivilisation movement from the beginning. And she bravely taps into the most challenging topics of our societies, not only the leadership itself, but mental health, women engagements, and many, many others. So without further ado, I'm going to just invite you to first share your own inner reflections to, can leadership exist without a leader? And then we go from there. And of course, we are inviting everyone who is with us to participate and actively collaborate in this discussion. So maybe Vladimir, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. It's so nice seeing you here. And sorry if I'm a little bit not energetic, so I'm still drinking my first coffee of the day, so I am getting started with everything. But we have 1 hour, so I really want to be efficient in talking. So answering the question, I think it's a yes and a no question, like everything regarding humanity and society. So can leadership exist without a leader? So here in Serbia, we tried something like that with the student movement. So there are a lot of pros and some cons as well. So in that kind of organizing, so it is a matter of how do you balance the two, because when you have some organization and you have a leadership less structure, some people go to the top, some a little bit less. So some people get highlighted a little bit more than others, even if you try to not highlight them as much. So in the public conscious, some people emerge as leaders at one time. So in the structure without a leader, within a year or two, some people are more highlighted than others. So it is a matter of balance, and how do you keep those people that even get highlighted a little bit um, in control, so that they don't have full autonomy to do things completely as they wish. So that is like my one sentence answer to the question.
Great, thank you. Alice, would you like to come in and maybe continue with this opening statement?
Thank you, Violeta. For me to answer the question, I want us to first reflect on what is leadership, and what are the different. I'm sure we all know that there are different forms of leadership, right? So there is the title, someone who has a title. I am a CEO, I'm the president, I'm the director, I'm this, right? And then the leaders of influence who people will follow with or without a title. And usually the people who leaders of influence, they don't need to be appointed. Somehow society just chooses those leaders. It could be because of their actions, it could be because of what they're doing, the kind of responsibilities they've taken on. And also, the other important issue is what do we gain from leadership? Personally, I think the most important thing is accountability, because we could have all manner of leaders. Like I said, there could be a servant leader, someone who is out there just to serve the community or serve humanity. But at the end of the day, in case things go wrong, are they accountable? Are they willing to step forward and say, oops, I messed up, and I'm willing to make amends or to rectify the situation? From the continent where I come from, I think that is one of the biggest challenges. Like, so many people come up and want to be leaders, but the level of accountability is non-existent.
Yeah.
So also the other issue, the last one I would say, is that before I get to that, is also there's what they call inner leadership, meaning before you lead others, how do you lead yourself? Who are you? How do you show up to the world? Because many of our leaders, they would want us to do certain things. They set up like laws or rules, and they would want us to follow those rules, but then they never follow them. So meaning, before you lead others, how do you lead yourself? And actually, where does this start from? Those are all questions on what do we actually need leaders, and what type of actually leaders would those be? And lastly, to conclude on the introduction would be, when I was younger, I would have just told you the answer is either yes or a no, just like the previous speaker mentioned. But I genuinely believe it also depends on the society we are in. For so long, I thought the kind of democracies we have on the African continent make a lot of sense, right? And my question is, why haven't they worked? for us in many countries in Africa. And then now as I've grown older, I look at the Middle East, and like some countries in the Middle East, for example, like in the Emirates, these people have thrived with kingdoms, right? So this is like authoritarian rule. And my question now is, I always now pose, is it that do we need, as Africans, do we need that kind of leadership to thrive? Like, is there actually space for that type of leadership? Because 30 years ago, for me in my world, there was no space for that. But now we've seen societies where they have that kind of leadership and they are thriving. So anyway, for me, those are my grounds. Again, just like the previous speaker, there's no, I guess, right answer, yes or no. But definitely, rather, should it be even shared or shared? I believe definitely we need leaders.
Wonderful, Alice. I think we're going to get back to that question. How do you lead yourself before and get yourself ready for leadership? Or is there a level of consciousness among people that before they the role of leadership, that they're aware they have to deal with themselves first? Let's explore this later, but for the opening statement, Gabrielle, how did you face this challenge when you were organizing overnight huge community on internet to deliver some really inspiring goals during the COVID times?
Yeah, I mean, in the traditional, hierarchical structure, generally, you would think that this type of events and the responsibility ultimately is somehow linked to authority, to someone who's accountable, who's taking the time to actually do things. What happened during COVID and that specific movement, I would say, is really something special because everyone felt somehow responsible. So it was really a collective responsibility that was awakening, which generally it's not something that you see in companies or how generally societies are organized today. And this actually brings me also to other IT projects today. There are many open source softwares projects, and they do work on peer-to-peer mechanisms. So I would say it requires a shift from compliance to actual commitment. And of course, there needs to still be some sort of structure and agreements and full transparency. But in this sense, like what we managed and what, of course, many other projects are managing is that individuals somehow negotiated their natural roles and just made it work. There is actually a very interesting company nowadays. I don't know. It's not really relevant perhaps for this topic, but it's called the Morning Star Company, which is the largest tomato processor, which basically operates entirely without managers. So they're very special and unique in this leadership sense, because as a company, you generally need to have some sort of rules, and instead, for example, they're not reporting to a boss, but the employees just drafted, for example, colleague letters of understanding, and they're voluntarily peer-to-peer agreements. Outlining basically their own responsibilities, and if someone fails to meet their commitments, then the responsibility for addressing the issue lies within the affected peers, but not a manager. And I mean, shortly, I would say it's possible to also work this way, but as colleagues said, it's really about the society, and it's really about the individuals, whether they're ready or not for this type of self-managing organizational structure, let's say.
Well, that's a very interesting case. Could you drop the name of it in the comment? And we'll get back to this concept during the discussion. And now I would invite Rajni also just to come in with the opening thought. Rajni, recently you were hosting also quite an inspiring session on co-leadership and different new ways of leadership. So what's your take on that?
So Violeta, that was an excellent experience because for me also that was very challenging concept to understand, as I have many a times I have been in that position of co-leadership. But to define it properly, to understand it in depth was altogether different experience. And with leaders like you and other two ladies, I think that was amazing learning. That was very insightful session. Also, I believe that I understood one very core concept of leadership, which I would like to share over here, that if you look at the essence of leadership, I mean, I'm not even talking about co-leadership or multi-leadership, just the word leadership. Leadership is more of a process rather than a person or a position, or it is not tied with any hierarchy. And generally, when there are such spaces, so individuals step forward based on their expertise, context, or capabilities, and they allow leadership to emerge organically rather than forced leadership, position-wise leadership, hierarchy-wise leadership. So I believe important is not who is leading, important is the direction, whether it is being carried out in the right direction with the right influence and with the shared responsibilities. And of course, I think that's the massive confusion that I have seen occurring in the organizations, because majority of the times people have no clarity about their roles, where it will lead them. So people they hold themselves back, and they are not sure whether they should be even making a trivial decision, because they don't want to land into the position where nobody will come to their rescue. So yes, I hope I get to share more things as the discussion progresses. Thank you.
So now please just come in and comment. What are your reflections to these opening statements? And we've heard a lot about the process, responsibility, accountability, depending on the context and situation. So based on what is happening around us, where do you feel that the leadership itself as a concept we could take in the next stage to start serving the communities, not to lead to this destruction that we see around us globally, especially this moment?
Can I start? So I would just want to add, hearing a lot about what is leadership from everyone, I want to add one also keyword. I think it's a part of good leadership and governance, and that is mutual trust. So good leadership, or leadership that will bring to some kind of prosperous organization, country, whatever, needs to be based on trust. Because if you don't have trust, then you have authoritarianism, and you have people who want to be on power just to be on power, and that their life depends on that. But if you have trust between the people, between the governing organizations, and people that are in positions of power, then you can have something that is bringing prosperity. And the trust part is very hard to be established. So that is something a little bit that Rajni has talked about in the process. So if you are choosing leaders based on merit, based on a process where you see how they are doing, what are their actions, and a little bit about what Alice also said. So this leadership of influence, so people that do things and get recognized by society, or that they are of worth, and that their ideas, what they are thinking about, is something worthy. So that is one way of getting people to trust that person, that person knows how to do things. Therefore, if that person tells me what I should do, maybe I should listen to that person. So
Vladimir, how did you achieve that in such a huge movement? I mean, maybe you can share some numbers. There were thousands of students and professors connected. And how did you, what was the base of this trust, or have you achieved it? And could you sense it in the movement itself?
So, yeah, I will tell everybody a little bit just about the background, if not everybody knows. So, in Serbia, in November of 2024, one canopy in a train station in Novi Sad, which is the second largest city in Serbia, collapsed, ended up killing 16 people. That train station was renovated that summer, so a lot of people figured out that because of corruption, because of misuse of funds, that canopy collapsed on people because it was newly renovated. And of course, that brought a lot of anger. Also, going back the 12 years of authoritarian rule that we have in the country, that all built up, and this was the event that took people from over the edge and wanted to organize themselves. And in December of the same year, students started to organize their own protest regarding what happened by blocking their faculties and universities. And that started to spread, like everybody that started doing it, because everybody was so outraged. Eventually, by February 2025, every faculty in the country was closed. So every student in the country was affected by it. So then even high schools started to organize themselves to block it, because that is the way that young people who are studying, that is the way they can make pressure. So it is not perfect. They are not studying. The school is closed. But how do we make pressure to our government? That is more than just going out to the street, whistling, blocking for a few hours, something. This was established as the way. Then there was this practical element of these blockades, which is how do you then organize them? How do you lead? Because every faculty has a lot of students, etc., etc., and every voice of that person should be included. And so early on, and I was a person that was involved in building that system. So in the second university, which was blocked, I was a part of in that organization. So to use a model from one blockade in Croatia, and those guys, they were blocking their university faculty of philosophy in Zagreb for 30-something days, and they made a manual of what they did, what were the challenges, how everything went. And so it was a very useful document for somebody who never has been in that situation. Of course, in Serbia, it became 10 times larger, but we used one model of what people told us, and then put it in our context of implementing direct democracy on faculties. So, and organizing student plenums. So every student is allowed to come. The people who are holding these plenums are always rotating. And it was made it to this kind of structure where the plenum is actually somewhat of a parliament. And every student from that faculty can go there and raise their topic, say something, and then vote eventually. Then, after some time came by, they had to implement restrictive measures for people who are there, and you can see that they are there just to sabotage the whole process. So it was not perfect, and it was really from case-to-case basis of how everything worked. But everybody organized these action groups for different types of activities regarding media, communication, organizing food, organizing different kinds of events, security, so not letting everybody in, or so everybody can go out, of course, but not everybody can come in, especially people who want to dismantle everything. So these kinds of checkups, they really had to be established and maintained by the young people there. working 24/7 on the gates of the faculty, for example, and things like this. So they organized these kinds of working groups who were accountable to their plenums, and they could be changed depending on the situation of how they performed, etc. And then we had a bigger thing, which was university plenum. So every city in Serbia is a university which has different kind of faculties. So those faculties from one city, they were organized, had representatives for the university plenum. And university plenums were in discussing among themselves as a bigger organization. And from those university plenums, you had one larger national plenum, which was like organized, which was most top organ of these kinds of organizing, which led to nationwide protests, which were coordinated beautifully, from sometimes more, sometimes less, but they were able to create an atmosphere of organization, which led to a biggest protest ever in Serbia, called, when in Belgrade on 15th of March last year, more than 300,000 people gathered at one place in protest. And they organized every 2 weeks big national protest where you had people from every city in Serbia going to one place by walking, by bicycle, by car, by organized transport. So you always had people who were walking from every part of the country, walking to one place where there will be protest, people and cyclists. So not to use up a lot of time. So this is kind of the context. The question was, so can these kind of things work? So yes, they can, but now when seeking political power, so these organizations which were established throughout last year, because not a lot of political change has happened in our context, they want to seek political power through elections, which will be organized at some point. So they are now in a problem of how do you transcend these kinds of organizing into one conventional leadership, which you need to have in order to gain power in the first place, and then maybe dismantle the whole system. So they are in the process of that, and we will see in which direction that will go. And yeah, sorry for this a long talk. So I'm yielding back the floor.
No, thank you very much, Vlad. I think this was a very clear description of how this mass sort of engagement can evolve and can actually start delivering on a baseline a lot of results, however, lacking then the overall impact on a larger scale, which was sort of a motivation, and sort of now moving into the old frameworks of self-organizing as a party and trying to seek political influence through the current stage of development. So that is an important message. So maybe, Gabrielle, you can share something similar from this open space engagements. How is that self-organizing community maybe compared to this one, or has a different type of tools and seek the sustainability in a sense of deliverables?
Yeah, I mean, I put in the chat also, right, that the open source IT projects are also working on this peer-to-peer mechanism. And on this point, there are many examples that we can take from the IT industry, from Linux to Python, the Apache, and other projects. How leadership works, for example, in these projects, and again, it differs from one to another, but is that one person, usually the founder, has the final say over important topics, but authority is earned through trust and not a title. And so also active contributors earn decision-making roles at times through demonstrated merit. So decisions are taken by consensus in some of the projects as well. And in others, influence is based on current work and not history. So leadership must be continuously re-earned. So you're not sitting, on a chair with a title, and thinking it's a government position, whether it's an NGO, whether it's a company or something else. And perhaps this is a little bit of we can call it a mistake, but it's just like human nature nowadays, where power is seen as a commodity or something that once you acquire, nobody can, take it out. And so this concept perhaps of power also should be reinvented perhaps, or we need to think of models which could transform this into a dynamic force that basically circulates through a network of relationships. And trust was mentioned. Trust is extremely important in this sense, because individuals, communities are formed based on an understanding that, hey, I either like your project, and so yes, we have a shared vision, or I simply trust you. And so sometimes it's easier for people to be connected to a vision rather to trust specifically to one person, simply because many things happen in life, and we see that people cannot give their 100% every single day. And so the responsibility that then lies on that initial person, the founder or the leader, is quite high. And this is something that also, generally it's not an issue, but like if a group is working well, the main problem, it's a logical consequence of like a successful project, is again, how do you deal with resources? Everything today is based on research. So who pays for the domain? Who pays for the server? Who pays for expenses of this or that? So at the end of the day, unfortunately, what we see is that when profit enters the room or expenses enter the room, then all of these power struggles actually begin to crumble if the organizations did not actively make sure that everything is very, very clear. And then even then you cannot be 100% sure that this will be fully understood or not manipulated in some way. Again, human nature, so you cannot really bet on that fully. But I would say that for power generally to really circulate freely in any project, any organization, I think it must be exercised more as a stewardship rather than ownership. And this is basically perhaps going from a practical aspect, going to prevent the accumulation also of power. And will give organization a design mechanism that can actually actively disrupt the formation of permanent hierarchies. And so this currency of power, is more accessible, but it's also more transparent to all members.
We mentioned a very important element here, just briefly, if you could address it. When the expenses and profits hit the room, lovely expression, what happens to trust? What's your experience?
That's a very deep and long discussion. In some projects, it's never questioned. In some projects, what I've experienced is that it's really I really don't want to go in this way, but some national stereotypes, you start rethinking them. Are they actually true? Are people really, made up this way? And ultimately, it's really, you try to understand the inner leadership. So what do people want? How can you include them? Or you really try to understand the impulses, the insecurities, the desires for dominance, right? Because if you give everything, like you give the platform, you give everything, and then I mean, it's not perhaps like the most diplomatic way to say, but some individuals generally, I mean, we all have like a roof, right, on of our possibilities of what we can achieve based on I mean, our experience, education, society, family situation, and many other I would say preconditions. And so at the end of the day, it's really a custom-made solution. What do you do with a situation like that? Because it really depends also on the culture of the different individuals. So if the leader or the organization somehow manages to secure funds, nobody will ever question anything. The questions always starts when I would say something or someone simply stops doing something. So this is the I would say the crisis situation that can be created once someone who used to do things stops doing certain things. And then here it's like an awakening perhaps happening of, okay, what now, right? So this is a little bit of a I mean, longer discussion. We can go in many details, but I would say that it's really about sometimes lack of self-direction. And so when when concepts like external validation enter also the room, then the type of leadership that you need actually needs to come within the group, right? So they need to come with accountability without external coercion. So this is, I would say, the ultimate path that, again, you cannot impose this. So this is something that it's it's a work that every individual needs to do on themselves in order to understand first what needs to be done and then later how.
This is a lovely transition to back to Alice. Alice, you also brought forward this accountability and inner leadership. Could you continue this discussion with your experiences, how you understand it?
Well, before I actually get into that, I just wanted to add on what Gabrielle was saying. I find that the situation she's talking about, like in an organization where you have like, open source, everyone is transparent, that would be like the ideal world where everyone is transparent, everyone wants to share, when you agree, let's share this much. But then Violeta, you asked, what happens when the profits get in? I guess the human in us come out. I've worked in a law firm my whole life. So this is not something lawyers are actually embarrassed about it. For them, it's like, I've put in this much, you understand? I've brought in this much money. I'm able to bring, to carry all these accounts. I can't have the same share. You understand? We have all these profits. So there is no way I can have the same amount of money with someone who is cleaning the windows. So that is now when conflict, comes up, and that is when now you need, like I said earlier, is context matters. What kind of leadership you need at for a specific organization, or if it's a country or a society or a community. It depends on what you're also experiencing. Are you experiencing war? Are you experiencing some kind of strife? You need leaders, actually different leaders during all that time. Because when you talk about, imagine a country is facing war, when you talk about shared leadership, you're not going to be able to protect that country because everyone will be, in different directions. No one will give a command, should we go and attack or not attack? But what could be the this is something I've had like different what do you call it, discussions about it. We have to understand there are different levels of leadership. There are leaders who are actually very wise in our society, but they can never lead from the front. So they can never lead from the front. So we have leaders at the front. They might actually have nothing in their heads, but then they depend on the leadership of the people who are leading from the back and the leaders from the middle. So every society, every organization needs those kind of leaders. This person might not have achieved so much in life, like what you're saying, what is the definition of success, or doesn't make as much profits, but they are very wise. And where do we get that wisdom? Human beings, we are very different. We hear differently, we see differently, we feel differently. Some people are very good at reading patterns, so they would be able to advise the leader on the top that, by the way, you could be making all the shots and all these things, but I feel more. I feel that if we take this direction, we'll move faster, or we'll move, a much longer, bigger distance. So I feel like there's a space for everything. There's a space for sharing leadership, and also there's a space for that day when you need the voice of who does the back end with, like who is making the final decision. You can't have 100 people making the final decision, or like in case there's a tie, you need that one person who the back ends with. And then the issue about accountability was to me, that's where it all starts from. How, when you're choosing a lead, especially leaders who we choose, whether it's in an organization, in a community, in a small village, or a country, or the UN, who are the people? How do you, before you stand up and say, I want to lead this society, how do you lead yourself? How do you lead yourself in your home? How do you lead yourself in your very small community? And when now this brings self-reflection on you yourself as an individual. So you must have that first relationship with yourself. Do I treat people well? Am I a fair human being? Do I believe in justice? Do I believe in transparency? Otherwise, please don't waste our time. Can you please step aside because you don't believe in transparency, you don't believe in fairness? But somehow along the way, because like I said, there are different people, leaders in a society play different roles. Like I've said, there are people who are able to speak up, and actually, in many times also in different situations, we need a leader. Depending on, sometimes you have a situation where the citizens are, or in an organization or wherever, a community, feel oppressed, and you need that person. They might not have so much wisdom to speak up and tell the emperor that you're naked. So I feel that I think the direct answer would be, it all depends on the context, the type of organization, the people you're leading, because some people actually are some societies are, you're told something in very clear terms. 1, 2, 3, stand up, do this and go. Other societies, you have to plead and find different mechanisms of actually making people move. Do you understand? Some people, it's very clear. This is what the law is. This is what requires for all human beings for us to thrive. No, other people need to be chained first, to be taken to prison, to understand that, oh my goodness, you live in a society where you need to have certain values that actually for the good and the betterment of humankind.
Wow. This world of leadership has so many faces and
Yes.
so many stages. Rajni, how would you reflect? And then I would invite also.
Well, I think in this one discussion, which started with one question, it became multi-layered discussion because there were so many other aspects which were included, which has made this discussion even more interesting. So I think I would like to add, and I totally agree with what Gabriella talked about, power circulation. I think someone is accepting me, asking me to accept. Anyway, I got a request. Okay, so Gabrielle, I totally agree with you that power should circulate freely within an organization, within system. It doesn't need to sit all the time with one person. And that is precisely, I think, the world has been viewing currently. So I think a power, if it sits with one person, it becomes concentrated. I think you have seen the consequences. The world is watching it, how things are going on. Even in organization, it should free flow through roles, situations, contributions. I have worked in media industry where everybody knew what their roles, responsibilities were. Every member of the team, be it content writer, editors, proofreaders, marketing head, everybody knew their role. But at the end of the day, people knew who is the answerable, who will be the person who is answerable for the outcome, with whom the accountability lies. Also, I believe the whole idea of co-leadership often comes from a very healthy and positive place within an organization or institutions, where the intent is very clear. It is to be more inclusive, fostering, diversity, to enrich discussions, to kind of encourage diverse opinions, distribute powers, kind of shared ownership, to build kind of shared ownership. And the most important is to avoid single point failure. That is very important. Single point failure is very important. And I think it always comes from the place of trust, strength, and transparency. That being said, over a period of time, what happens that in some organization, if these aspects are not taken care of, clarity, transparency, trust, it takes a wrong turn, and the whole idea, it goes downhill. And that's when we start that leadership, co-leadership starts fading. I would like to share one interesting observation that I have seen about human beings, and especially when I have started working with some NGOs and organizations which are based on collaborations and trust. I have seen that human beings feel way more invested in organizations, ideas, or projects of which they have been part right from the beginning, or right from the inception. Like I have been part of Ecocivilisation almost right from the beginning. So I obviously feel more accountable without anyone asking me to take the ownership, because I am emotionally invested in the organization. I have been part of it right from its inception, rather than people who join later. Because when you are sowing a seed in ground, you are planting it, nobody's telling you to water it, nobody's telling you to help it to grow, but that accountability comes naturally. But when it has already become a tree, at that time people may not feel as emotionally invested in that project or an organization. I think it's a very human thing. So this is what I have observed, and that's all from my side. Thank you.
Sorry, Violeta, you're muted. I heard noise in the background. I wasn't sure where it came from, so I muted you to be on the safe side. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. This notion of accountability and responsibility being in you when you feel authentic relationship with the project. Either you come at the beginning or you come later on as a branch, but it is this authentic relationship with it. Makes a lot of sense in this spread, or as you used, circulating leadership role. So we do have positive experiences, as I hear from all of you, that they are already emerging, these new forums, when people are self-aware, they have a clear set of values, and in a way they are confident in leading themselves from within, as Alice said at the beginning. So we're almost approaching the end. I didn't know that the time will shift so quickly. So is there any other additional comment from the audience before we go to the closure?
So, Violeta, I feel if there has been fairness while distributing responsibility and accountability, there must be fairness while distributing profits also.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I think it's not being ethical or morally correct. It should be part of a system. It should be part of the integral structure where I need not to ask all the time the person that, hey, I was involved in this project from day one. I have worked day and night. I have probably worked more than you. I need not to raise all these things. I need not to bring back all those past experiences or what I have invested in that project. So this is what I feel. And because Violeta, in my experience, I have seen that majority of the times people have fear which has not been addressed. You know what stops people to invest themselves into some project which can be very positive or at least innocuous, harmless, which is good for the society, but still people don't come forward because they are totally oblivious to what they are getting into. They do not know how much authority power they have. If they get into some trouble, what would be the consequence of it? So I think all that clarity is imperative in co-leadership.
Mm. Mm. And before we finish this, I could sense this topic of mental health that's been discussed in other sessions as well. But before I continue with my thought, San, please come in. I saw you raising your head, so please unmute yourself, please.
Cool, yeah. Such a juicy conversation, and I appreciate that leadership is something that is evolving, right? The leadership that we were used to in empire culture was associated with power, dominance, and profits. So we got really vested in this identity of being the leader, whereas leadership moving forward is more like a role. Leadership is like a hat that you can take and pass on to the next person. When you're wearing that hat, we evolve our capacities, what our learnings as we played that role. So when we hand the hat over to the next person, they are more capable and more able to serve that role. I think one of the things that has been really important for me from having had to play leadership roles is approaching it as a kind of servant leadership. So it's what people have been talking about is more stewardship, caring for, and my ability to respond to what's required for the context. Two skills I think that are really important is being savvy about psychodynamics, right? We as human beings, we're so complex. There's so many layers to ourselves. Like my savviness about psychodynamics has been recognizing when I can reach out to somebody and ask them for help. You know, previously I would it's all my responsibility, all the weight's on my shoulders, and I've got to fulfill this position and make this thing happen. So just being aware that I had this reluctance to ask for help. Another thing is to be skilled in diverse modes of cognition. So for example, intuition. How often are we embracing intuition in our leadership position? So like leadership's not going to look the same. It's going to really change as we move into this new culture. Lovely conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Violeta, can I ask Naidu a question? I have a question for him.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think everyone is able to lead?
I think leadership, if I may, Alice, it's a skill that we can develop and that we can share with each other. For example, one of the types of leadership is a coaching type of leadership, where you are part of this social organism and your role as a leader is to coach others to fulfill that position of leadership. So in answer to your question, that capacity is available to all of us. Maybe some of us are not willing to serve that position, but you'll certainly find people within your cohort who are interested in exploring this position of leadership or this role of leadership.
Yes, so you've gone back to the issue of the people who are interested.
Yeah.
Seriously, I've been in different spaces, and we all have different gifts, I would say, and different skills. So if we are an organization of let me say 100 people or 20 people, and you expect to go around, expecting everyone to lead, some people, it might be like the biggest burden. But they could actually do something else, and they don't want to lead, they don't want to do anything with leadership, but they're happy to do something else. They feel like they would rather put their resources. So I wouldn't want us to also believe that that world which I guess you're talking about, where you understand leadership, moves from one person to another, like it's actually automatic. Because trust me, so many people just look at it like it's the biggest burden for them to go back home, and the whole organization or the whole community, is on their back.
Mhm.
So the question is that then what do you do with people who are actually not interested in that kind of taking up that kind of matter?
Because this is an interesting concept. When we often say, as I wrote in the chat, experts and leaders. But when you look at the experts, for example, I'm going to be very simple, somebody who builds a table, they know really well how to lead all the process that has to be delivered to build that table. They know how to look for tools, for materials, for some assistance. So in a way, we all lead, but within our capacity and interests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to actually make my summary would be that because we have different gifts, some people can be very good leaders because they, like I said, some people hear more, others see more, others are very good at reading patterns, but they can't speak.
Exactly.
Do you understand? Like I have this knowledge, but I cannot translate it in a language that even 10 people can follow me. You understand? So what I can do, maybe I could just write it down, and someone who is able to speak, unfortunately, the people who speak a lot end up actually taking these roles, even though they don't even know much about what they're doing. I think we have a president like that right now.
But this would be
I won't mention the name.
This would be a perfect moment to actually bring this to closure. I could see that we just warmed up. And if we had one more hour, this would go really deep and broad. So I would like to thank all of you really for this very sharp and straight to the point discussion and dialogue. And I'm sure we will continue discussions along these lines. But I would dare to have one concluding remark. Leadership is a process. It's in every one of us, depends on the interest, the value sets we have. And as a community, maybe we are invited to recognize this incredible differences in capacities we have and recognize the coordinating stewardship roles that make sure that all these capacities can be brought forward and serve individual and collective in a balanced way. Thank you very much. And Tim, back to you.
Thank you.